And wherever you are, go ahead and share tonight's episode with someone, with a friend. And if you're driving in your car, let someone know where they can hear TMG.
It's time to get on board. TMG is taking off.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to TMG. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. I enjoy discovering and sharing real-life moments of inspiration from everyday people. And this show is about finding moments of inspiration for our everyday lives. And look, and if you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of TMG. I'm your host, Travis Patton Sr. Hey, guys, real quick, do me a favor. Don't forget to share and like our YouTube page. That's Tell Me Something Good with a capital T. And as always, before I get started, I want to give a huge shout out to my biggest supporter, my biggest fan, my lovely wife, Nicole. Hey, girl, how you doing? I know you're watching. I know you're listening. Man, tonight's episode is going to be a memorable one. I know you're going to remember this episode right here. And whether this is your first time tuning in or you've been watching the show for the time that we've been recording and been on, let me take this time to tell you thank you. I'm glad that you're here. I really am. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm excited to have my guest. And whether you are listening in Bangladesh, or maybe you're in Canada, or maybe you're in Australia, or maybe you're in Mexico, wherever you are around the world listening to the show right now or watching, let me take this moment to tell you I appreciate you. Thank you so much, guys. You know how we do it now. This show is all about finding moments of inspiration in our everyday lives. So if you have an inspiring story that you'd like to tell and maybe come on the show, do me a favor. Drop us an email at tellmesomething21@gmail.com. And you say, well, Travis, man, I don't want to come on a show, but I know someone that has an excellent story that your guests would love to hear. Drop us an email. Send us that information. tellmesomething21@gmail.com. And you can even remain anonymous if you'd like. Guys, we have a few affiliate sponsors. I want to go ahead and play that information. Get that out of the way because we're going to get this party started. Don't go nowhere. Thank you. That's right. Come on in, everybody. If it's Thursday, it's time for TMG. And we're streaming, guys. Walmart is a proud associate sponsor of TMG Tell Me Something Good podcast. Please use the special link bit.ly/Tell Me Something Good and visit our sponsor. Remember, I may earn a commission when you buy through this link. Fanatics is the place to go for all of your officially licensed sports gear from your favorite sports and sports teams. Use the special link bit.ly/Tell Me Something 21 and pay a visit to our sponsor today. Remember, I may earn a commission when you buy through this link.
Breaking your phone sucks. Breaking your phone, then trying to sell it online sucks. Breaking your phone, selling it online, only to find out that the money you'll only get for it sucks. Breaking your phone, selling it online for peanuts, shipping it, and finding out that you got scammed sucks. Gizmodo makes selling your phone fast, safe, and simple by paying you the highest price for your device. And with Gizmodo's free unlimited shipping and price guarantee, millions of people are starting to sell on Gizmodo. Fast, safe, simple. Gizmodo, the best way to sell.
There it is, guys. Please visit one of our affiliate sponsors. Guys, the link is in the chat. And if you're watching this, pay attention so you can hear the link information. There you go. Guys, tonight's episode, if you did not catch it, is entitled Brainstorm. Yeah, Brainstorm. I know you're wondering, where in the world am I going to go with that, guys? Tonight's episode is entitled Brainstorm. A brainstorm. Now, I know most people, when you think about brainstorming, you think about a group of people getting together to kind of solve a problem. You know, they say we're going to have a brainstorming session in the office. Everybody comes together and everybody adds their own little bit to it. But did you know that a brainstorm is actually a moment in which a person is suddenly unable to think clearly or act sensibly? It's like, oh man, I'm having a brainstorm. I'm having a brainstorm when you can't quite think the way you usually would, and something interrupts the way that you think. Let me, guys, help you out. A cerebrovascular accident, more commonly known as a stroke, may be best described as a brainstorm. A stroke occurs when blood flow to the brain is interrupted, either due to a blockage or a burst blood vessel. And guys, get this, every year, more than 795,000 people here in the U.S. alone have a stroke. Yeah, they're victims of a stroke. And about 610,000 of these people, it's their first time, so their first new strokes. Today, guys, our guest will discuss some of the signs, the warning symptoms, recovery, and what comes next. Guys, do me a favor. Give a huge TMG welcome to Angie Reed. Angie, what's up? How you doing?
Hi. I'm great. How are you?
Angie, I'm doing great. I'm excited. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you, Angie, for showing up and being here today.
You're welcome. I love sharing my story because it's so important for people to understand that strokes can happen anytime to anyone. And they're actually a little bit more common in women.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, we're definitely going to dive into that, Angie. We're definitely going to dive into that. Guys, thank you, Angie, for being here. Angie, we were talking about brainstorms. They're sudden. They can happen anytime, anywhere. You said strokes are kind of the same way. Let's dive into this. Brainstorms are sudden, they're unpredictable, Angie, and can change a person's life. Absolutely change their life. Tell us what happened with you.
Yeah, when I was 46 and I was otherwise perfectly healthy, or so I thought, I woke up one morning just ready to go to work like I normally did, and I couldn't get out of bed. Everything on the left side of my body was completely paralyzed. I didn't really know it at the time. I just knew I couldn't get out of bed and I didn't know why. I woke my husband up because I was moving the bed funny because I was kind of trying to get myself up. And he woke up and he said, "What are you doing?" Because I was making unusual movements. And I said, "I'm trying to get up and take a shower." And he said, "You sound drunk. Are you drunk?" And I thought, well, it's 6:30 in the morning. I'm not drunk. I'm just trying to get up and go to work.
It's too early for all that.
And he said, "I can't understand you." And so he got up to turn on the light and he looked at me and said, "The left side of your face looks like it's melting off. I think you're having a stroke." And he called 911. I didn't want him to call 911. I was kind of like, no, I'm sure I'm still just half asleep. You know, I just didn't compute. And luckily he didn't listen. He called 911 right away. And that's so helpful because it's so important when you suspect someone's having a stroke to call 911 immediately, because every second counts with stroke. Every second lost is brain loss. So I was having a stroke. The EMTs came, got me, took me to the hospital. I ended up having emergency surgery to remove a clot, actually 2 clots, one in my neck and one in my brain.
Wow, are you kidding me?
No.
So your life is normal. The night before, Did you feel anything the night before? Anything out of the ordinary the night before, or the weeks leading up to this?
Yeah, the weird part is I've been a migraine sufferer most of my life since I was like 16 years old. I have migraines, and I would get a migraine with aura. And what that means is you would get like a sign that a migraine was coming on. And my sign was always like this blind spot in the shape of a C in my left eye. And the weekend before, so I had a stroke on a Tuesday morning. The weekend before, I had the worst migraine of my life. It lasted
Wow.
2 days. Usually it would be gone, in 6 hours or so after I took some ibuprofen.
Right.
This weekend, it lasted 2 days. I ended up going to the ER. My sister's an ER nurse, and she said, come on in and we'll get you hooked up to one of the IV cocktails to bring down the migraine pain.
Right.
I was really reluctant to do that because emergency room, you don't want the emergency room bill. But I was in so much pain. So I went in and had that done. And they did a CT scan on my brain. This was a Sunday night. They did a CT scan because I told them that my blind spot was like 3 times bigger than it had ever been in my life. And they said, well, let's just make sure. They did a CT scan and saw nothing. My brain scan was clear. And then I went home. Monday, I went to work as usual. I just kind of had a low-grade headache, but I was able to function at work. And the night before, I was fine. I was normal.
Wow. So this brainstorm, really for you came out of nowhere. I mean, what you were experiencing as far as your blind spot and the migraines, those were kind of normal, even though they seemed lasting a little bit longer than it normally was. So that was nothing really out of the ordinary for you. But
yeah,
the night before this brainstorm, it just kind of a sudden storm that caught you. Was this your first time experiencing something like this?
Yes, it was the very first time. I'd never experienced anything like this before.
Wow. And did you have no pre-existing conditions that would have given any kind of evidence that it was leading up to a stroke?
Not really. I mean, the most common pre-existing conditions are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, family history of strokes. I didn't have any of those. But what I later learned is because I was on birth control pills and because I'm a migraine sufferer with aura, that those two things are both risk factors for stroke. I didn't know that. I mean, I wish somebody had told me not to be on birth control pills in my 40s. But my doctor never said anything about the risks. I should have known better. But I didn't know that those two things were both risk factors for stroke.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't so much as, any pre-existing conditions, or as it was just, medications possibly you were taking that kind of may have added to that. So that's good information to know. All right, so here we are. You had this brainstorm, you got this stroke, your husband woke up, so was your speech kind of slurred, or it just he said you sound like you were drunk. So obviously your speech was slurred, but did it sound slurred to you?
To me, it didn't. To me, I sounded normal because I knew what I was trying to say. And so in my brain, I heard what I was trying to say in my own voice. Wow. So yeah, very, very strange. The whole thing was very strange. And the crazy thing is there was no pain involved. I just couldn't feel anything on the left side of my body.
Could you move it at all? Did it feel like a weight holding it down, or you knew you wanted to move it, but you in your head you saw it moving, but it just wouldn't move.
Right, exactly. It didn't, the weirdest sensation for me was there was a hand on my stomach. And so my good hand fell over and I was like, that's weird. That's a woman's hand. And I was like, who's in bed with me? Because it had a wedding ring. It had my wedding ring on. And I was just like, that is so weird, because I couldn't feel it from my left hand's perspective. Right. I could only feel it like I was touching somebody else's hand.
Right. Exactly. Wow.
That was just a very strange, just a weird sensation.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible, Angie. All right. So I want to dive into something here. A lot of times people think that, when strokes happen, there's always going to be some sign. There's always something. But sometimes it just may be pre-existing conditions, and sometimes it's just like in the summertime. It's summertime now, and these summertime storms can come out of nowhere, just boom, and all of a sudden it's a rain. And sometimes these brainstorm strokes can occur when we're least expected, catch us off guard. So tell us about the recovery. So here it is, and you've had the stroke. Your husband warned you. Your husband told you. You called 911. You're in there. You've had it now. Recovery. What does that look like? What? Tell us about your recovery process. Your recovery had I think you said it took some years for you to get where you were able to do again for yourself. It took some years and it took some constant work. What were some things you learned about yourself doing this time?
I learned how resilient I am and just how strong I am. It's important to tell you too, no two strokes are alike and no two recoveries are alike. It really depends on how quickly you take action and get medical intervention. That will determine your ability to recover and how much physical deficit you're left with. I was very lucky that we caught it so quickly and I was able to get that surgery, the clot removal surgery, so quickly that really the impact to my brain was pretty minimal. Even though they considered it a massive stroke, it's not because it left massive deficits in its wake.
Right.
Physically, it took me a couple of months. I had physical, occupational, and speech therapy for a couple of months because I did have the telltale face droop. I did have weakness in my left arm and my entire left side for a couple of months. So I did go to outpatient rehab almost every day for 2 months straight. And I was able to work through the exercises and kind of continue to advance in rehab until I finally was kind of graduated out of rehab. And because I didn't look like a typical stroke survivor, I wasn't in a wheelchair. I didn't need a walker. I was able to walk. I used a cane for a couple of months, more for just emotional support, really, and probably just to make me feel better. But I didn't need it. For me, the emotional recovery was the hardest. So I thought I was ready to go back to work. I was just like, I don't look like I had a stroke. Clearly, I conquered this thing. I kicked it in the butt. So I went back to work way too fast. I went back to work about 7 weeks after I had the stroke. And what I didn't realize is that going back into a busy office environment was going to be too much stimuli for my brain. It was just going to be overwhelming. Because at home, when you're at home or you're in rehab, you're not around the physical stimulation of hustle and bustle of an office, lots of people talking, because I worked in an open office concept. And then when they asked me for accommodations, what accommodations I would need to come back to work, I didn't think I needed any accommodations because I was thinking physical. I wasn't thinking my brain's capacity to handle noises and sound and just the pressure of work and just the added pressure of me thinking that I should be 100% the same as before. But I wasn't. My brain was different, and I didn't account for that. For me, the hardest part of my recovery was the mental health impact, because strokes, very common. 30% of stroke survivors will have post-stroke depression, and oftentimes post-stroke anxiety comes with depression.
Oh, wow.
And those hit me like a ton of bricks and completely took me out of the picture again. I had to go back out on disability and get those conditions treated. And that for me was the hardest part of recovery. One, because it was so unexpected. Two, because I was judging myself. I felt like I was weak. I wasn't strong enough to deal with my issues. And I didn't know what was happening to me. So that was the hardest part for me.
I can get that, Ange. Moment of transparency, guys. The beginning of this year, and you and I had this talk, Angie. The beginning of this year, I woke up one morning, and as I normally do, getting ready for work, walking down, and I passed out on the bed. I didn't lose conscious. I just fell on the bed. I was dizzy, and when I got up, the room was spinning. So that's okay. Let me just sit here because I stood up too fast. You know, we've all done it. You stand up too fast, you get dizzy. Because I do jump out the bed like a hot. I do. I hop up out the bed like something in grease. I hop out quick. And so the room began to spin. And so it's okay. I'm fine. I'll be all right. Sat here for a few minutes. I got up. So as I got up, the room kept spinning. I said, you know what, Travis, you still, don't worry about it. You'll get over. It'll pass. It'll go. So I'm walking down the hallway to go down the stairs. And as I'm walking down the hallway, I can move my leg. I can move my leg, my right leg, but I couldn't feel it. I could barely move my right arm. It felt like somebody was holding it down. Like, you hold someone's arm down, and I couldn't feel it though. I knew I wanted to move it, but I couldn't move it. And the hallway began spinning and began spinning. And so I told my wife about it, and she goes, "Go to the doctor now." She goes, "Go to the doctor." Like, okay. So I drive myself to the doctor, which was 3 minutes away from the house. And so I get into the doctor's office. Now I call my wife on the phone and say, "Hey, I'm on my way to the doctor." She said, "I can understand you." She said, your speech is really slurred. I said, "No, it's not." I
Mhm.
remember the conversation. I goes, "No, it's not. I'm talking normal." She goes, "No, you're slurred. Your speech is really slurred right now." And so I get
Mhm.
into the doctor's office, and you have to go in and you have to sign in. I have the pen in my hand. I'm trying to hold this pen in my hand. I can't hold the pen in my right hand. I know how to spell my name, Angie. So in my head, I can see the letters that I'm writing. That's not what came out on the paper.
Mhm.
That's not what was on the paper. The doctor said, "Yeah, let's get you to the emergency room. I think you're having a TIA, which is a precursor to a stroke. Go through the whole gambit, test everything." They said, "We don't see stroke at all. No damage, no nothing." And they asked, what was I doing? I said, "Well, 2 weeks prior to this ever happening, I started taking 81 milligram aspirin, baby aspirin, the chewable kinds, the orange ones, the good ones." and so they said, "We're going to be honest with you. That probably helped you. That probably saved you a lot, because they hooked me up like I was a car. They just tubes everywhere." And I stayed in the hospital for a while, and just I got out the hospital, had more tests to be done, and they
Mhm.
said, "We don't see anything." So people people think you can't, it won't happen to you, and it can.
Right. I mean, I was only 46, and a lot of people think strokes only happen to people that are elderly.
80s, yeah, the 80s and 90s, and
Yeah,
and me and my wife, we work out.
yeah, I was healthy too. I've run 4 marathons in my life.
See,
Not recently, but I have run 4 marathons in my life. But yeah,
brainstorms. It
and I've
happens.
never smoked, and I've never done. My cholesterol and my blood pressure have always been totally good. So it was just, yeah, it was very. You
It,
don't expect it. You just don't expect it.
you do not, guys. And what we're not saying to scare you. We're saying to prepare you, and we're saying things that you can do at preventive. I'm gonna share some information later on in this show, guys, to show you that it is preventive. We could do
Yeah.
some things to help keep ourselves safe on this. So, and the brainstorm. All right, it
Mhm.
came, it gone. The biggest thing you said was the emotional part, the mental part. You got to tell us about that, Ange. What was that
Honestly, it was hell. It was
like?
the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. My confidence plummeted to zero, and I've always been a confident career woman. I've always
Right.
put my career kind of first and been very much, climbing the corporate ladder and into that kind of thing. And so I judged myself very harshly when I was just finding life too much to bear. And
It-
even just going into work became so debilitating. I would find myself having to meditate for 30 minutes or so before I even got in the car to go to work. And then when I got to work, I would
mhm.
sit in the parking lot for 15 or 20 minutes, crying or meditating or something to just
Wow.
get me to be able to go inside and
Mhm.
get my job done. And I didn't know why. I didn't have a label for it. I didn't know it was anxiety and depression because I really had never felt those things before. Um, and then it got to the point after a couple of months, it got so bad that
Mhm.
I call it my nervous breakdown because I kind of lost my grip on reality.
Wow.
And I started um, having erratic behavior and very manic behavior. My family was really, really worried about me. And I became kind of monotone and very just flat. I became so flat. I had no personality for a little while. I had no voice inflection. Nothing could bring me joy. Nothing. I felt nothing. I felt no joy, no sadness, really just devoid of all emotion. And for me, that was very jarring. And my sisters kind of stepped in. My husband was very confused and
Hmm.
wanted to help me the best he could, but he didn't know what was going on. my sisters recognized that I was having a mental health crisis, and they got me in to see a psychiatrist who recommended I go in and be evaluated for an intensive outpatient program. So I did go be evaluated at a local hospital for their intensive outpatient program for mental health. And instead, they admitted me to their inpatient program because I was in such crisis. I really was. I'd lost my grip on reality. It was scary. It was the scariest, darkest time of my entire life. Having very, very scary thoughts of ending my own life. I ended up leaving that hospital after about 5 days. And I wasn't ready to leave. I just kind of played the game that you play when you're in a place like that. They're scary, they're lonely, and they're confusing, and you feel like you don't really belong there. And so I just wanted to do what the doctor said, go to the group.
Enough to get in and get out.
Yeah, get in, get out, go home and be normal again. But I was so mistaken. When they let me out, there were about 3 days between when they let me out and when I was supposed to start their intensive outpatient program. Well, there was no real plan for those 3 days. And I sat there, like, I just call it, I stewed in my own juices, and I seriously contemplated taking my own life. I kind of laid out all of my medication one night on the bathroom counter and considered taking them all. And something in the back of my head just said, this is not your legacy. This is not your legacy. I do have 3 kids. They were a little bit older at that point, but and I have a husband who loves me dearly. I have an amazing, support system of family and friends, but I wasn't really thinking about them in that moment. I was thinking about how to end the pain, because when you have horrible anxiety and depression, it physically hurts. It physically hurts. And it's just hard to explain. It's very hard to explain. But that to me was the hardest. It took, when you say years, it took years to get me back. It was really to survive and to get past the mental health crisis and to get my mental health into a good place. Yeah,
I can imagine that, because after my event, I was a little anxious because I'm a very active and energetic person, so I was a little anxious to stand up, because the last time I stood up, I got dizzy and fell out. So
yeah.
So your mind goes back to the last thing you remember, and you have to tell yourself you have to take those steps to handle that mental part. And a lot of times, Angie, we hear about the physical impacts of a stroke, but people ever talk about the mental impacts of it, how it impacts that person mentally, emotionally. This brainstorm, it interrupted what was happening before. It interrupted the life that was occurring before. So whatever that person was like before, that storm has interrupted that person's everyday life. So that person is now looking at their life differently, going, well, I can't do that anymore. Or what if I do that again, this will happen again if I do that. And that's a lot emotionally and mentally to get over with and to deal with. And you had the presence of mind to do that. But Ange, guess what? A lot of people don't. So that they're still reliving that instance again over and over in their lives. So in essence, where they're decreasing the quality of life they have, because there is life after a stroke.
Right. And for me, I wasn't really conscious of, thinking about it over and over again. I don't think I was really that concerned. I'm sure it was back there. But when your brain when you have a stroke, there are biochemical changes in the brain that happen. So the stroke itself caused depression and anxiety. Because it's so appropriate that you name this episode Brainstorm, because I explain it in my first book that it was like lightning had struck my brain. And then there's always the before and after stroke.
Yeah.
And most stroke survivors define their life in either before stroke or after stroke. Before the lightning struck and after the lightning struck. And it's, it takes so much strength to move on and move forward and have a positive attitude. And it really is all about attitude. If you think you can, or you think you can't, you're probably right.
You're 100% right. Either way, this is what it's like, guys, right here. A brainstorm. It's like lightning in your mind. It happens so quickly. and you're just not aware of what's taking place. So you said it made you depressed. Was there specific things that made you depressed about, or just it just had a whole cloud kind of fall over you?
It was really just the whole cloud. I think it was a biochemical changes in my brain,
Absolutely.
because I don't recall being, and I've never been a depressed person, or
Right.
I've always been a glass half full
Yeah.
person.
Me.
And
Same here.
yeah, but of course I was sad because I had just written my first book. It was a marketing book,
Mhm.
and I was supposed to start traveling and speaking about the book for the agency that I worked for at the time.
Right. Right.
And I was sad because that was interrupted. That was put on hold, if not, forever, then for quite a while anyway. And I didn't know what my future was going to hold career-wise. When I did go back to work and I was trying to edit my book and do some things as it had come back from the publisher with some recommendations,
Mhm.
I couldn't make the words on the page make
Wow.
tons of sense. And that to me just felt like I was a personal failure. So I was very judgmental of myself and so harsh on myself. And that just contributed, that pressure to try to be my old self and to try to perform at my old level just exacerbated the anxiety and the depression that were already there and already growing roots. And so it was just a perfect storm to just wreak havoc on my life. And it was awful. I don't recall any specific thing that I was depressed about, honestly. It was just all of a sudden, nothing brought me joy. All of a sudden, all of a sudden, I was a different person.
Wow, guys, that's amazing. I told you guys this was going to be a good episode. That's incredible. So years after multiple and physical, emotional help that you've gotten, you're on the other side of things now. You are on the other side. Listen. I don't care where you are right now. There is another side. It's tough. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you won't have to work at it. I'm not saying you won't have to sweat at it. But there is another side to what you're dealing with. There's another side to this story. Angie is here because there is another side to that. And I know you said, I don't know, Travis, you don't know my situation. I don't need to know it. You need to know it. You need to believe it. There is another side. So after all these things, Angie, you're on the other side of things. You're on the other side of this stroke. When did you realize that you wanted to write a book about your experience?
Well, the first time I started let me take a quick step back. Right after the stroke, when I was just starting to get better, I had friends and family say, okay, well, this is the subject of your next book. Because I remember I had just written my first book. It was a marketing book. And I remember thinking, there's no way I can write another book. What are you guys talking about? My brain is damaged now. I'm not as smart as I used to be. I don't have those capabilities anymore. Don't expect that of me. That's too much pressure. And I got mad. And I said, I'm never writing another book. And I'm not going to try, because if I try, I'm just going to fail and make a fool of myself. And I just was catastrophizing it. And then I don't know what eventually made me want to write my story, but I really wanted to document it for my kids and my grandkids. My great-grandmother wrote stories about growing up on the farm and all the stories of her childhood. And we, as her great-grandkids, loved to read those stories. And I just thought, when I went to the hospital and they first started asking me about my risk factors and if I had a family history of stroke, and I said, no, at least I don't think so. Well, I wanted my kids to have some documentation of what I went through so they could say, yes, we do have a family history of this. Yes, we do have a history of depression and anxiety. And just to see how it came about in me so that they would maybe notice some trigger warning signs in themselves. I just wanted to document it mostly for my family and friends. And I did that about 3 years after the stroke. And it was really, I wasn't planning on publishing it widely. I gave the manuscript to my friends and my family. And then I just kept obsessing over it, not being good enough, not being helpful enough, and that there was more I needed to say and more I needed to put in the book. And so being a recovering perfectionist, which is what I am at this point in my life, I went back and I said, okay, this book needs to help more people. This book needs to be more than just about my story. It needs to be about the story of others, because I found out that 30% of stroke survivors or more will suffer from these conditions. But
Wow.
when I was suffering from my post-stroke anxiety and post-stroke depression, I couldn't find any literature about it. I couldn't find anybody else that had ever suffered from it before. I had no guidebook. I had nobody helping me through it. And so I ended up writing my first book. I can hold it up right quickly. It's called Invisible Scars. It's stroke survival, recovery, and the unexpected mental health fallout. Because it is like invisible scars. There were times when I wished, and this is going to sound really selfish, but there were times where I wished I would have had a physical disability left over from the stroke so that people could see that I was not the same and understand it. Because if you looked at me, you wouldn't know. But you can't see the invisible scars that are on my brain. Only I have seen my scans, and I've seen how much scar tissue there is in there. And that leaves an indelible mark. And then once you learn about the brain's miraculous ability to reprogram itself it's called neuroplasticity. It can those brain cells from the stroke that were damaged will never grow back. They will always be dead. But your brain can form new connections around the scar tissue through practice and pushing yourself and learning new things and trying new things and putting yourself in different environments. Your brain will be firing on all cylinders to make new neural connections so that you can keep living your life and keep improving. And it's crazy when you think about that. It took a stroke for me to realize how pliable my own brain is and how I can learn new things, do new things, and be a new person even. And so I was able to write my first book. And once I wrote the first one, I just kept writing because I just kept feeling like I had more to say. So I've now written 4 books since having my stroke.
Wow. Wait a minute, Angie. So you had the stroke. Now you took us on this journey from where your husband said, "Hey, your words are slurry. You sound like you had a 6 a.m. cocktail, and you're going at it already without me." And here she went from there to on the other side is you had 4 books. Now I know I have 3 of them here. I'm gonna pull them up. There we go. I have 3 of them here: Identity Crisis, Invisible Scars, and Mental Health Hacks.
Yes.
And I know Invisible Scars, that one, it says stroke survival, recovery, and the unexpected mental health fallout. That is so key. The unexpected. And that's why it's invisible, because no one expected that to happen.
No.
You have a stroke, and people say, "Oh yeah, they had a stroke in this," but it's all another part, the mental part of it that got you down. And here it is. You on the other side is writing books, publishing books.
Yeah. And Identity Crisis I wrote because when I thought I could never go back to my career in marketing and public relations, I thought I wouldn't be able to write again or really even be as smart as I used to be. I just always thought I must have had brain damage and my brain didn't work the same anymore. I had an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was without my thriving career.
Oh, wow.
And the unfortunate part is I had given so much of my time and attention to my career over the years that I didn't really have anything to fall back on. I didn't have any passions or hobbies that would keep me busy, keep my mind active while I was recovering. And so it had plenty of room to just focus on the negative and focus on what I didn't have versus what I did have. And I did not know who I was at all, but I wrote Identity Crisis. And it's crazy because I did go back to my marketing and PR career. And I was actually working in marketing at the time I was writing Identity Crisis. And as soon as I finished and sent it off to be formatted, I got laid off from my job. And so I was like, oh my God, the timing of this is crazy. I was just writing a book about You Are Not Your Career. And I just got laid off. So I pulled the book back from the formatters and I added an epilogue and I said, you will not believe this. I just got laid off. So time to practice what I preach. Time to put into practice what I just talked about.
Oh, man. You said something about identity crisis. You said it. People put so much into their careers. They don't know what's next. They don't know when the career ends, what's next. And even when the stroke occurred, you still were trying to find yourself. You still had that identity crisis. You were still trying to locate who you are and who you were. What do you want people to learn from this journey that you've had?
Yeah. One of the things, especially when it comes to career, is you have to have balance in your life. You have to have other things that are just as important to you. Your career is not who you are, it's what you do. So if you can't separate yourself from what you do, then you are probably too enmeshed in your career. And if something were to happen, you're going to have a crisis. You're going to have an identity crisis. So think ahead about that and think about, who are you if you're not your career? So who are you outside of your career? And then really start to grow and cultivate and nurture those parts of you that you've maybe neglected in the past. Maybe it's the hobbies that you love to do, or the activities that you love to do, or spending more time with your family and friends. You never get time back. You never get it back. So stop hoping for tomorrow what you can do today. So if you miss a friend you love dearly, call that friend up, make a coffee lunch or dinner date.
Exactly.
Reach out, like, make those things that you value. So really get in alignment with what your values are, and then live your life in pursuit of those values.
Absolutely.
And then if your career is taken away from you, then you are less likely to have an identity crisis. A lot of people have identity crisis when they retire and they no longer have work to go to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
that whole routine of getting up, going somewhere, doing something has been interrupted, and now you don't know what to do.
Right. And now when you're at a dinner party or something and you're introducing yourself, how do you introduce yourself? Well, I'm a retired whatever. I'm a former such and such. No, we do not have to live and die by our professional titles.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a deeply loving, compassionate person who cares about the people around her. It's those things that really matter.
Exactly. And that's how we should be introducing ourselves, by that. Hey, guys, absolutely. So I like to ask my guest this question. So I'm going to ask you. Let's say there's somebody listening right now, Angie, who went through what you went through, who shared your journey. They went through what you went through, or maybe they know someone who went through this type of journey. What's one thing you would say to give hope to someone out there who has suffered a stroke, or that may know someone who has?
You have to give your brain time to heal. It's not going to heal overnight. Brain injuries take a very long time to heal from. I'm still healing almost 7 years out. I'm still making progress. We want to rush everything in our lives, especially Americans. We want everything rushed. And
right now.
And just because we say, I'm going to get better, I'm determined, I'm bound and determined I'm going to get better. Guess what? You cannot rush your brain in healing. There are things you can do to help it, like cognitive games and keeping yourself and your mind busy, but you can't rush your brain's healing process. And everybody heals in a different time. There's no timetable for stroke recovery. And this is very, very important, because some doctors out there are still telling stroke survivors that you'll only make progress in the first year. And after the first year, you're stuck with what you have. That is a bunch of bull. You can continue to make progress years and years and years after your stroke. You just have to believe it, and you have to have the right mindset, and the right mindset will get you everywhere.
Ooh, that last part, what she just said, the right mindset will get you everywhere. Angie, I'm going to put your social media information up here. I know you could be contacted here on social media. What's your website, Ange?
It's Legacy Coaching for Her. So one of the things I've done since getting laid off from my most recent marketing job was to start becoming a life coach, because people were telling me, you're naturally good at this. Maybe you should become a therapist. And I thought, well, I'm 53 now. If I go back to school to become a therapist, I'll be practicing therapy by the time I'm 60, and I don't want to be in total debt. I'm not at that point in my life. And so I looked into becoming a life and career, well, not a career coach, a life coach. And I got certification. I started coaching people just like for practice, and just to show myself that I could do it. And once I started coaching other stroke survivors, and I mostly focus on female stroke survivors, because we have our own different set of challenges. We are natural nurturers. We're natural thinking that we have to be all things to all people.
Right.
When you have a crisis like a stroke, you can't. And so I have now been coaching for the past 6 or 8 months. I've been coaching female stroke survivors, and I'm actually building an app called Stroke Sisters.
Oh, wow.
Which will be an app for to help stroke survivors, female stroke survivors, have a sense of community, be able to connect with others that are going through the same thing, that have had similar outcomes, and then similar just experiences, and then also to be able to get education, information, resources, all the things that are so hard to find when you have a brain injury and you don't know where to look. There's a ton of information out there. So Stroke Sisters will bring it all together in kind of one central clearinghouse. And I want it to be an amazing community where females can get together and know you're not alone. Nobody has to be alone in their recovery journey. It's most women that I talk to, though. And in the past month, I've talked to over 25 women, one-on-one. The reoccurring theme is abandonment and isolation, because you go home from the hospital, you know that, you're different in whatever way. You expect your family and friends to rally around you and
Correct.
be your support system. For so many, that's not the case. For so many,
Exactly.
especially if they look different, if now they have a disability that they didn't have before, their face maybe droops. Maybe they're a little bit, uncomfortable to look at. I don't know. People don't know what to say, don't always know what to say or do. And so a lot of times your network will kind of fall away. And
Correct.
especially if you're not ambulatory. So if you can't get yourself out and about, you'll feel like you're stuck in your house and you're stuck there and nobody understands and you don't have a support system. And it's even if you have a spouse who loves you and kids who love you, when you start to think that your friends have abandoned you, it's such a lonely feeling. And so I want women to know they are not alone and they never have to be alone and isolated again on this journey back to you. And it's not even back to you. You'll never be the same exact person you were before because your brain has changed, but you will be a new and improved and spectacular version of you and whoever you're meant to be going forward.
That is very empowering, Angie. That's very, very empowering. People need to hear exactly what you just said. Need to hear those words, guys. Before we get out of here, I want to thank Angie Reed for being here today, being our very special guest. Angie, I might call you back again, so don't worry.
Well, and I forgot to mention my fourth book. It's called Rise: Mastering the Art of Resilience. It's because, through everything I've been through, and I didn't even go through all the stuff I've been through in my life. Like we all have, right? We all have lived through so many things, but I've always had people tell me how resilient I am. And I used to get really pissed off at people. I thought that I was like, you don't understand. You're only resilient when you have to be. And I wish I didn't have to be. I wish I hadn't had these things happen to me. I wish I wasn't. And then I just decided to flip the script and say, okay, I'm going to embrace this word resilience. I am resilient. And here's what resilience means to me. And I even in the book start out with quotes from other stroke survivors about what resilience means to them. And Rise is not necessarily a book just for stroke survivors. It's a book for anybody who is looking to master the art of resilience. How do you bounce back from difficult things? How do you move forward? And that's what that book is about.
Cool. Guys, that sounds cool to me. I like that. I like anything that's going to inspire people to think different and be different regardless of what you live like. I want to share a couple things and before we got here, guys. All right, so there are a lot of myths out there about strokes. A lot of myths, a lot of things that's not true. One of the common myths is that strokes cannot be prevented. That's a myth. Actually, up to 80% of strokes are preventable. Up to 80% are preventable. Another myth is this. There's no treatment for a stroke. Yeah, at any sign, call 911. There you go. How about that? And anything beyond that your doctors have you do, immediately treatment may be available. Another myth, strokes only affect the elderly. Well, we proved that wrong. We proved that one wrong. Definitely a myth. Stroke can happen to anyone at any time. Guys, it's a brainstorm. Strokes happen in the heart. No, they happen in the brain. Heart attacks occur in the heart. Strokes occur in the brain. Strokes recovery only happens for the first few months of a stroke. You just proved that wrong, Ange, and you just said that.
Wrong. That's wrong.
Stroke recovery is a lifelong process. You can continue to recover. Don't think that your recovery is limited just within the first few months. Don't think that your recovery is just in the first few years. You can recover as long as you set your mind to it and continue to do it. You can recover. I'm giving the last one, guys, here. Strokes are rare. Yeah. Strokes is the 5th leading cause of death in the U.S. So that's a fact. They like to say there's a myth, and here's a fact. So there you go, guys. I can go down the whole list. I'm going to put in chat the medical site that I got these myths and facts from, so you can look at them as well. But Travis, I'm not watching it. I want to hear it later on. Well, you get it. I promise you. I'll get it to you. Jeez, come on. And guys, I want to thank Angie Reed for being here with us today on TMG Tell Me Something Good podcast. Guys, I know you want me to stay, but I got to get out of here. Angie got to go get something to do. I got to go find some food because I'm hungry too. So we're going to get out of here. But before I do, Angie, if I don't do this, they're going to say something to me. So let me go ahead and get this started, guys. There we go. Okay. Let me get this right. There we go. Angie, thank you so much for being part of the show today. You made this show better. I mean that. And as always, guys, listen, you can tune in right here every Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern to listen to the show or stream it on your favorite streaming platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, guys, iHeartRadio. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And as always, imparting, if you're going to tell me something, then tell me something good. I'm out of here. I got to go. Peace.
Bye.
I know y'all like this. Don't play with me. Look at my little model down there just dancing for us, y'all. Let me get out.